I tell you what, they've got to do something to reconnect with the country, because if you look at the numbers, over 40% of those that voted for them in that 2019 80-seat majority landslide have no faith in them whatsoever. They've got a heck of a lot to do.
We were just talking about Nigel Farage, who the data watchdog has just ruled that the former chief of NatWest, Alison Rose, twice broke data protection law when she leaked a misleading story about the closure of his bank account to a BBC journalist. And Mr Farage, the former UKIP and Brexit Party leader, is on the line now. Hello, Nigel.
Good morning.
Your reaction to that ruling then?
Good. I mean, how could it be any other? I mean, as far as the law's concerned, there was very clearly an important data breach or two, and the ICO have confirmed that. I also believe very strongly that if you look at the FCA rule book, as to the codes of conduct for people working in financial services, there are 2 or 3 quite important rules that have been broken there as well. And so I think, on those purely factual grounds, I think there's little question that what Dame Alison Rose did, backed up by her staff at NatWest Bank, was just wrong on every level. And they tried to deliberately mislead the BBC, and then all the other media took the cue, as they would do, to say that the reason my accounts had been closed was because I'd fallen below the necessary financial limit. And yet, when I got the original subject access request 3 times in there, it was stated Mr Farage's accounts are commercially viable. So it wasn't just a breaking of the rules, it was a willful attempt to mislead everybody as to the true situation. And I think, the timing of this is absolutely right. The NatWest board meet today. Now, the ICO report you're referring to said they wouldn't take any further action because the bank have an independent inquiry, and that inquiry will be put before the board today. Although I have to be honest, I don't hold out much faith for the independence of the inquiry. So I've no doubt whatever happens today, this one is going to run on further.
It's been reported that the board, the NatWest board, who are meeting today, as you say, are going to dock Rose's multi-million-pound severance package, which could be about 2.4 million. But even if that happens, do you think she should face further consequences? Should she, for instance, lose her damehood?
Oh no, I'm not going as far as that. But what I am saying is this: the total package she could walk away with today is actually £11.3 million, because it's a combination of salary on guarding leave, bonuses for performance, well, that should be out of the window, a variety of share options. And here's the point. NatWest isn't just an ordinary private company. We bailed NatWest out, tens of billions of pounds of British taxpayers' money after their stupidity bailed them out. We still own 40% of it. So if you think about it, if she walks away today with 11.3 million, 40% of that is coming from your listeners.
That is very striking. People forget that hangover from the financial crash, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And, other banks, Lloyds, for example, the government was able to sell its stake that it had put into Lloyds. But NatWest, we put the money in at roughly £5 a share, and the share price is still languishing at £2.50. So by any measure, to say that she's done this fantastic job and is due these enormous payouts, no. If you fail in life, you have to pay a consequence for it. Now, this is going to be very difficult, because the NatWest board, if you remember originally, when the truth first broke about why I'd been banned, it was a hell of a furore, they initially tried to keep her in position, and in the end, we believe it was government pressure that led to her sacking. So they are really caught very much in the middle here. But I just don't see, given that it's there in black and white from the ICO, that the law was broken. I just don't see how she can walk away from this with that massive package.
Nigel, what do you say to the FCA? You've made lots of noise about people being unbanked and debanked for their political views, but the FCA's preliminary view into all of this said they found no evidence of banks shutting down accounts to customers based primarily on their political beliefs. What do you say to that?
Well, how do you judge what is primary, what is secondary? I mean, the fact is, we know, and you could get on your program in the next half an hour a number of people who are related to political figures or high-profile figures in the judiciary, where people have had their bank accounts either refused or indeed closed down. And I think one of the problems with the FCA, rather like NatWest, they've all become so politicised in the last few years. I mean, the FCA have been pushing hard onto banks and financial companies this whole diversity and inclusion agenda. And it seems many of the companies and regulators are talking much more about climate change and much more about employment targets than actually they are about the financial security of people's money and whether they're being dealt with fairly. It really is about priorities. And I think the FCA at the moment is just in the wrong place.
And just finally, Nigel, possible by-election coming up in Wellingborough. Reform UK's number of votes in Tamworth and Mid-Bedfordshire was bigger than the Labour majority. Do you think that could happen again? Should they stand aside?
Stand aside for what? Stand aside for a party that's given us the highest taxes in 71 years. Stand aside for a party that has given us a surveillance state. We're not quite China, but we're getting there. Stand aside for a party that tells us repeatedly they'll stop the boats without ever really intending to do so. No, I don't think so.
Is that your Tory leadership manifesto, Nigel?
Well, I tell you what, they've got to do something to reconnect with the country, because if you look at the numbers, over 40% of those that voted for them in that 2019 80-seat majority landslide have no faith in them whatsoever. They've got a heck of a lot to do. And if Rishi thinks stopping people buying cigarettes who were born after 2009 is an election winner, then I think he's got another thing coming.
Time for the country to have a change, Nigel. How do you feel about Keir Starmer?
Well, I'm all for a bit of change. You know, when things aren't going well, you should change, and that applies to everything in life. But if Keir Starmer gets in, would we spot the difference? What would the difference be? What would the difference be? I mean, we've got two forms here, basically, of two forms of social democracy. There's really almost no difference between these two parties other than a few marginal issues around the edges. We are not having a real choice in politics at the moment.
Well, Nigel Farage, former UKIP and Brexit Party leader, thanks very much for joining us here on Times Radio. Nigel Farage, not quite an endorsement for Keir Starmer there, but came close.